T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is so fun.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is so fun.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. On this episode, I'm going to be giving you guys my reaction to the Rams win over the Saints on Thursday night. I got some really interesting takeaways from that game. Got my college football playoff predictions for you guys. Who's going to win the national championship? Is it going to be Washington or Texas, Michigan or Alabama? Plus, I got New Year's 6 bowl predictions. We're going to get into a couple of other college football topics. A report came out that FSU once again is looking to get out of the ACC, but there's some complications, and I doubt they're going to find a way to get out anytime soon. Before we begin, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that you can find every episode of the podcast available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, make sure that you rate us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. Share the pod with your friends, family members, and acquaintances if you enjoy. And let's talk some ball, man. So the Rams took down the Saints on Thursday night. This game pretty much went the way it was supposed to go. Okay, there was an obvious disadvantage that the Saints were in coming into this game, and that was Dennis Allen. This dude is one of the worst head coaches in the National Football League, and he was looking like a junior varsity football coach out there compared to Sean McVay, who's like a varsity level coach. And this game, it looked close. It was a one-possession game at one point because the Saints had came back. They got a little bit of momentum. They got a stop late. But oddly enough, Dennis Allen decides to go for an onside kick, even though his defense had way more than enough time to try to get another stop. The coaching decisions by Dennis Allen are some of the dumbest in the history of the Saints organization. Not just that, but his defense got shredded tonight. And remind you, not only is he the head coach, but he also calls the plays on defense. And Sean McVay calls the plays for the Rams offense. So when it comes to X's and O's and pure execution, Sean McVay completely outclassed and outmatched Dennis Allen tonight. Derek Carr didn't play bad. Chris Olave let him down like twice on third down. This just was one of those games where you look at the coaching advantage favoring the Rams. It was pretty obvious that they were going to win this game. Pretty obvious. I was expecting this thing to be a blowout. I thought the Rams were going to win 30-17. That was my prediction coming into this game. But, I said if the Saints played well, it could be 30-24. The Rams offense, imagine how good they're going to be next season. When the offensive line improves, Puka Nacua improves, Matthew Stafford, he can find a way to stay healthy. This is a team that is equipped to win and compete for championships for the next 4 to 5 years. The way they drafted, when at one point coming into this year, we thought they were going to be terrible. You got to look at Sean McVay with what he's done with this young team, with all these rookies and young studs, and actually have him as the front runner for Coach of the Year. Who else is doing a better job? Yes, the Browns look good and Kevin Stefanski has exceeded expectations with all the injuries, but the expectations for the Browns this year was that they were good enough to be a playoff team. Not everybody was expecting the Rams to be a playoff team. A good amount of people thought that they were going to go, 7-9 or 7-10. You didn't even know if Matthew Stafford could stay healthy. I was one of them. New Orleans, this team continues to be the biggest underachiever in the NFL. And I didn't have high expectations for the Saints coming into this year. All right, and I've barely talked about them because there's nothing really to talk about. The same issues that they had last year are present this year. You just have a slightly better quarterback. Derek Carr, tonight, he was okay. Well, I'll say he was pretty good. I ain't going to do him like that. He did make some pretty good plays, but he just wasn't good enough early on to start this game. And the offense, they got a little bit too hot when it was already out of reach. And then Dennis Allen, he kicked it away with the stupid onside kick decision. And then the way that he went about doing the onside kick too was a little weird. This team, most people thought they could win 10 games. And maybe they could win a playoff game. And when you're in the NFL's weakest division, you would have thought that with how much talent was on this roster this year, despite the injuries, they would have been good enough to win more games than Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. Or even the Atlanta Falcons. This team is pathetic under Dennis Allen. If you would have had Sean McVay coaching the Rams this year, do you know how good the Saints could be? They possibly will be the best team in the NFC. Dennis Allen, if he was coaching this Rams team, despite the studs that they have that are young, they wouldn't be as good as what they are right now under him. Dennis Allen, when he took over this Saints franchise as the head coach, there was never really a lot of room to be optimistic about this guy. He was already a failed head coach with the Raiders. The Raiders situation, people try to make it an excuse for him that, it's the Raiders, they're such a terrible organization. When you get hired to coach a terrible organization, you should at least be able to rebuild it. That's what you're supposed to do. Look at what Dan Campbell did with the Detroit Lions. New Orleans fans will tell you that they were a little optimistic, but that's just what comes with normally being a fan. It's not like anybody wants their team to go into the year and just be terrible. Everybody has to have a little bit of hope. But most realistic Saints fans, and even the ones that were a little overly optimistic, understood that Dennis Allen was not a good head coach. It doesn't take you 3 times to figure out what somebody is. Somebody shows you who they really are the first time they do something. And we saw how Dennis Allen's first stint went with the Raiders. It was terrible. There's not a lot of second chance head coaches that work out. The only ones that work out are the ones that have proven resumes of winning. Former MVP appearances, or not MVP appearances, but Super Bowl appearances, like Sean Payton, Doug Peterson, even Mike McCarthy. These are the second chance head coaches that you should look to hire, not ones that have failed and ones that didn't even have a winning season. So the Rams take down the Saints tonight. The way this impacts the NFC playoffs, the Rams are in firm control of that last playoff seed in the NFC. Meanwhile, for the Saints, they dropped to 7-8. If the Bucs lose to Jacksonville next week, could possibly be the NFC South championship. But I don't even know if the Saints would be good enough to win that. Meanwhile, for the Rams, they probably are going to end up getting into the playoffs. With the way Sean McVay has coached this year, this probably is his best coaching job up to this point of his young career. Nobody really had high expectations for the Rams. I mean, Matthew Stafford is one of the best pure passers in the league. Some of the throws that he was making off his back foot with pressure in his face, like not even having to step into it. He's been so underrated for so many years. And now the fact that he's on the team that always is in big games in the national spotlight with a solid supporting cast and good coaching. The more you just watch this dude, the more you're like, damn, like, how was Detroit not able to win with Matthew Stafford? Like, this dude is fantastic. He arguably looks like a top 5 quarterback up to this point of the season. And for the Detroit Lions, I guess it says a lot more about their previous regime and how much Dan Campbell means to this franchise now. Like, did you know that the Detroit Lions are raising ticket prices? Like, that's crazy. For the Rams, man, this is a really surprising season. They got to give Coach of the Year to Sean McVay, because there were people thinking that this team was possibly going to be in the tank for Caleb sweepstakes or something like that. This is why good coaching matters. Talent doesn't really mean much in the NFL if you don't have great coaching. And Sean McVay, this is masterclass. If you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We got somebody in the comment section talking about Pokemon. Man, you know what we talk about on here? We talking about football, man. If you didn't want to hear about football, then why would you even click on talking about Pokemon? Man, we talking ball over here, man, and we got a lot more ball to talk about tonight. I got my college football playoff predictions. I got my New Year's 6 bowl game predictions. Remember that every episode of the podcast that's on the channel is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. Got to get me a sip before we get back into it. All right, man. So we got some New Year's 6 bowl games that we got to get into. We got Mizzou versus Ohio State. Missouri could have their first 11-win season in nearly a decade. This has to be college football's most surprising team this year. Eli Drinkwitz. I thought this dude was a mid-head coach going into this year, but this dude proved me wrong. And you're going up against Ohio State team that they don't really have a lot of big opt-outs. We still don't know what JTT is going to do. Travion Henderson, he might not play in this game, or Marvin Harrison Jr. But even if these dudes do play, Missouri still is going to have a good enough team that they're going to be able to have a shot at winning this thing. This is a veteran team. They don't really turn the ball over a lot. They don't get penalized all that often. And they have a fantastic coaching staff. Probably the most underrated coaching staff in America. You just can't have a 10-win season in the SEC being poorly or midly coached. Ryan Day, this is a big game for him. I don't care if it's a bowl game, and I don't care about the whole bowl momentum thing. The Big Ten is going to be challenging next year. You got Washington, Oregon, and USC rolling in there, and this dude can't even beat Michigan in the last 3 years. And he's had the luxury of playing in a conference that only has 2 other good teams to go up against. That is Michigan and Penn State. Everybody else you just can't out-roster. What are you going to do now against top level competition every single season. And Missouri is a top level team. Like if they lose this game, I'm going to be a little bit concerned about Ryan Day. I am. This is a Missouri team that they have a fantastic offense when it comes to being balanced and being efficient. Brady Cook has 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He also has been a really big threat on the ground. And they got a fantastic running back too, Cody Schrader. This dude shredded Georgia. This dude is a one-man wrecking crew. And against Ohio State's defense, they've been pretty formidable against the run this year. Michigan had a little bit of success against them, but if you really watch that game, Ohio State's defense, they probably played Michigan's run game better than anybody else this season. Missouri, with how good Cody Schrader is, I think that Ohio State defense, they're probably going to bend a little bit. And they haven't seen a quarterback that has the kind of dual threat ability that Brady Cook has. J.J. McCarthy, I wouldn't really call him much of a dual threat. He's more of just a good pro-style passer. Now, who the hell is this dude, Devin Brown, starting at quarterback for Ohio State? Please tell me that they're not going to have that dude out there wearing 33 in this game. I hope they give this dude an actual number and don't let him go into this matchup against 33, because how can I take you serious at quarterback wearing number 33? And we haven't seen this dude throw a pass in a matchup since, October? Now, they do have some pretty good receivers playing in this game. Julian Fleming transferred out, but Emeka Egbuka, he's not opting out. Even without MSJ, you have a lot of depth at that position, although it may be a little unproven. Missouri's defense is pretty good, but I don't think their defense is just going to completely shut down this offense with how well they develop at the wide receiver position. As a matter of fact, you remember a couple of years ago, in one of those Rose Bowl matchups against Utah, JSN, he made a name for himself in that game. This is a chance where we're going to see who's going to be the next upcoming star at receiver for Ohio State if MHJ leaves and when Emeka Egbuka leaves for the draft. Defensively, for Missouri, you might have a little bit of a tough time if you're not able to stop Devin Brown if this dude actually is good. Now, when it comes to their run game, they're really thin at that position. Chip Trayanum, their RB2, he ended up transferring. You got Travion Henderson, who possibly is opting out in this game. So we don't even know if he's going to play. And if he doesn't, I don't know how much success they're going to have on the ground. And if this Devin Brown dude isn't good, you could possibly have a game where this maybe turns into a blowout. And I'm going with Mizzou to win this matchup. I don't really trust Ohio State's quarterback situation. There's a reason why they're in the transfer portal right now. Honda McCord, he wasn't that great, but I don't think he was bad. It's just a high level of expectation when it comes to playing QB at Ohio State. When you look at their last two runs of quarterbacks, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, both starters in the league. Missouri, they got a veteran team, and offensively, they just look more dependable than what Ohio State has out there in Devin Brown. I don't trust Devin Brown in this game, and Missouri is one of those teams that you're not going to beat them if you don't have decent quarterback play. Okay, this just isn't one of those SEC teams that, they're just a good story and they're not really good. Like, if you really check into Missouri football, these dudes bringing in a really good recruiting class. They got one of the best recruits coming out of high school. Like, they got their NIL collective. You got Luther Burden. Like, this program under Eli Drinkwitz, they're on the rise. All right. I wouldn't be surprised if Missouri would to blow out Ohio State, depending on how bad this Devin Brown dude is. Now, if he can play, then this could be a close game. I still like Missouri. Offensively, they just look a little bit more talented, and I just trust them a little bit more in this game. Ohio State's offense hasn't really been that dynamic this season anyway. Okay, in Missouri, they were really formidable against Georgia. This is probably the only team in the SEC during the regular season that was actually able to give Georgia somewhat of a game. And it was a respectable one at that. They beat Kansas State earlier this season. This is a really good team. This wouldn't be surprising if they won this game. Missouri's on the rise, people. I got them winning. 34-20 is my final score prediction. We got the Lane Train taking on James Franklin and Penn State in the Peach Bowl. Ole Miss, man, do not sleep on this offense. This is one of the best offenses in college football. They got a lot of depth and talent at wide receiver. You got Quinshon Judkins, one of the best running backs in college football. Jackson Dart has been really good this season. He's looked efficient as a passer. He's looked dynamic on the ground at times. This Ole Miss offense, they're good enough to hang up points on any defense in college football. Yeah, they didn't really do anything against Georgia and Alabama, and they got stomped in those games, but for the most part, this is one of the best offense that we've seen in college football this season. Penn State, on the other hand, they've had a really good defense this year, and their only opt-out is Chop. He's not going to be playing. He's preparing for the NFL draft, but outside of him, your defense is one of the most talented in the nation, but Manny Diaz is gone. So is this defense still going to look as good without them or without him as it was with him? They are really good against the run, and they got a really good secondary too, and they're really aggressive. And last time we saw Ole Miss against an aggressive defense when they played Alabama, it didn't really play out all that well. Their offensive line and pass protection can be a little bit shaky. And you wonder if Jackson Dart isn't able to have success on the ground, if this can be a one-sided affair when it comes to how Penn State's defense can perform against Lane Kiffin's offense. Now, I think that defensively for Ole Miss, you're probably not going to get a lot of stops. Okay, your defense has been terrible all season long. The only thing that your defense does well is get pressure on the quarterback. That's about it. You can't stop the run. You can't stop the pass. You can't get off the field on third down. You're not really great in the red zone. And I know Penn State offensively, like, they looked disastrous when they went up against Ohio State and Michigan, and they ended up firing their offensive coordinator after one of those games. But outside of those two losses, this offense under Drew Aller at quarterback has been really good. They're not as talented as what Ole Miss is, in my opinion. They don't really have a lot of depth at wide receiver, and their two starters, they weren't really that good against Michigan, nor were they against Ohio State. And with how dynamic Ole Miss is offensively, this is probably going to be a game that should be a shootout. I know Penn State has a really good defense, and Ole Miss doesn't have one at all, and they're a more complete team, but offensively, Ole Miss is one of the most talented teams in the country. They got shut out by the two best defenses in college football, Georgia and Alabama. Anybody, they could tell you that your team most likely will struggle against Alabama's defense too if you were Penn State, okay, and even Georgia. I'm taking Penn State, however, to win. You know, they're just a more complete team. This is going to be a shootout, but Ole Miss, they don't have a defense at all, and your offense should probably be able to score at will. They may get a couple of stops or two, but your defense is more dependable when it comes to getting more key stops in bigger moments. This probably is going to be a game that probably goes between the 40s to high 30 range. I like Penn State 41-34. It's going to be what I'm going to go with to be the final score for this game. I do have a lot of confidence in what Ole Miss is going to be looking like moving forward next season. They're going to be one of the best teams in college football, top 5 at minimum. All right, and they've done a lot of great things in the transfer portal and the recruiting, but in this game, you know, that defense, you're going to need some of those new transfers to really be able to suit up and play in this game if they were able to at all, because you just can't trust this defense, man. You can't. Now, okay, y'all already know who's going to win anyway, but we got the Orange Bowl, people. Georgia versus Florida State, man. Florida State, I know they're really upset with what happened, them not getting into the playoffs. How motivated are they going to be for this game? Now, the majority of their best players have opted out. They're not going to have Keon Coleman or Johnny Wilson or Jaheim Bell. Their starting running back, he's not playing neither. You are going to have Tate Rodemaker back at quarterback, but he didn't really look too good against Florida. And defensively, you're going to be without some of your best players on the D-line. That includes Jared Verse, But your linebacker unit and your secondary should be intact for this game, and that's going to be what your strength of your defense is going to be. And offensively for Georgia, I think that their offense isn't just going to be able to be highly efficient like how they've been for the most of the year against this FSU secondary. They are pretty talented, and they do have pretty good depth at that position as well if one of those starters opts out. And wide receiver play for Georgia, it's been a little bit wonky the last couple of weeks because they've dealt with some injuries. How healthy are you going to be going into this game? Most likely Brock Bowers may not play in this game. He may opt out. But if he does, then I doubt that FSU is going to have anybody that can stop him. But if he doesn't play in this game, then I do think that it's fair game for what Florida State and how good they can be defensively against you offensively. And they still do have pretty good talent on their defensive line when it comes to their ability to get after Carson Beck. But offensively for FSU, this could be a struggle. All right, they do got a really good running back, although their starter isn't going to be in. And they're going to need him to be the star in this game. Tate Rodemaker against this Georgia secondary is probably going to have a lot of issues. And the majority of their starters are going to be playing in this game. They're not really expecting a lot of big opt-outs on this side of the football. And they haven't really allowed anybody to throw for more than 200 and something change for a majority of the year. Even when they went up against Alabama, like Jalen Milroe didn't have a fantastic day throwing the ball against them. FSU's passing game, it looked awful against Louisville. Tate Rodemaker, he definitely is better than Brock Glenn, but against this Georgia defense, he's going to need to be able to make some high-level throws. And we're going to see how much talent FSU has behind their starters that played this season and what they're going to be looking like at that position going into next season. Because if you don't have good receiver play or good quarterback play, you're not going to be able to have a chance against Georgia. And we've seen what Georgia has done against the best teams that they've went up against this year. People like to throw out this narrative that Georgia has played a weak schedule. No, the fuck they haven't. Their last 4 games were against really good teams. They played Ole Miss, who they annihilated. Missouri, who was a pretty competitive team. Tennessee is a solid matchup. Hell, they would be the second best team in the ACC this year if they were in that conference this season. And then they had to play Alabama, who ended their 29-game win streak. Florida State, they just, it's just a bad game for them, matchup-wise. Georgia is just more superior to them talent-wise in this matchup. It's really disappointing that the players are opting out. You understand why they're opting out. They wanted to have a chance to compete for the national championship, and they got robbed of that by the committee, they feel like. Georgia, the majority of the team that we're going to see in this game is going to be back next year. Maybe minus Brock Bowers and Mims, their starting left tackle. And FSU just doesn't have enough offensively at wide receiver and quarterback to be able to even have a competitive game with Georgia. They may be able to keep it close for a couple of 2 quarters, but eventually Georgia should just pull away with this thing. Their majority of their team was built through the transfer portal, and their best transfer portal acquisitions are not in, and they don't really have a lot of talent that's proven against a veteran team in Georgia. Yeah, I like the Bulldogs. 31-14 is my final score prediction. Fiesta Bowl, Liberty versus Oregon. Oregon is a big favorite for this game. Bo Nix is going to be playing, but Bucky Irving, he's opting out. Liberty, what makes them interesting is that they're 13-0, and they got a really interesting backfield. All right, they got a really good quarterback, wide receiver combo right there, and they're a team that runs a spread option kind of offense where they like to use a lot of zone reads. They like to get outside of the pocket and have their quarterback try to extend plays, make things happen in the run game. And even though they haven't played a great schedule for the most part, they're a team that offensively, with how good their quarterback is on the ground and how much of a mauler their running back is, if this offensive line can hold up a little bit, they may be able to put up a couple of points against Oregon's defense. All right, I don't think this is a game that's going to be an absolute slaughter fest. They do have a pretty good coaching staff that has a really fantastic offensive scheme, and their quarterback, he's somebody who you really shouldn't sleep on. Caden Salter, he has 31 touchdowns through the air. He has 12 on the ground. He has over 1,000 yards on the ground also, which is really impressive. This dude is really dynamic in the open field. And anytime you have a quarterback that has a skill set like this, if he has one of those games where he just gets in the zone, it's going to be a nightmare for Oregon. Oregon has a fantastic pass rush, though, and they're really good against the run, which is what Liberty does better than anybody else in college football. But you see, the problem with Liberty is that with how much talent and size that Oregon has up front, you don't get that run game going and you have to throw the football against the secondary. It's probably going to be tough sledding. Now, Caden Salter is a capable passer, but he's not a fantastic passer. He's only completing around 60.5% of his passes on the year. And his mechanics can be a little bit off at times. He isn't really all that accurate when he gets pressure in his face, and he can't get outside the pocket. But if he just has one of those games where he can buy time for guys to get open, or he just ends up taking it when nobody is able to create separation, then this could be a little bit of a tricky game for Oregon maybe. Now, Liberty's defense isn't going to get too many stops against this offense. Maybe none at all if we don't see no turnovers committed. Bucky Irving, he's not playing, but their backup, Jordan James, he's averaging 7 yards per carry, and he had more touchdowns than Irving with 11. And Bo Nix, this dude is going to have an incredible Oregon career to cap this off. Just think about his journey. He wasn't really that great at Auburn. His dad played there, so there was a high level of expectation. And then he goes to Oregon. And, he just plays like an Oregon great. He may be the best quarterback that Oregon has ever had. And they got a really fantastic group of wide receivers. Tez Johnson, Troy Franklin both have over 1,000 yards. Liberty defensively, their secondary is really good at getting interceptions, and they're really aggressive. But Oregon offensively, nobody has really been able to stop them for the last 2 years. And Washington, even when they were able to stop them, they still ended up giving up a lot of points in the end. If Liberty's going to be able to score points against Oregon defensively, they got to be able to throw the football. And I don't know how successful they're going to be at that. And I'm going to take the Ducks to get the win. Final score, 42-20. Liberty may be able to put up a little bit of a fight in the first half. Maybe they just have the element of surprise, and Oregon's a little bit rusty because they haven't played football against nobody but themselves in practice for the last couple of weeks. But eventually, Oregon should start to lock in, and they probably should go to work because their run defense is really good. If their run defense wasn't good, then Liberty would have a better chance. But they run a spread option offense, which, involves their quarterback making a lot of split decisions with those option plays. And I don't think that they can have that same level of success with how dominant the defensive line play has been out of the Ducks this season. So I like Oregon not only to win outright, but I like them to cover as well. It's that time of the season where the worst head coaches in the NFL, their job security starts to be in question. And let me start that over. It's that time of the season where coaches start to lose their jobs. Black Monday is just around the corner. And I'm giving you guys my predictions for NFL head coaches I believe that are going to be fired after this season. We got to start off with Bill Belichick. It's done in New England. There's no way he's going to be able to come back from what we've seen the last couple of years. Tom Brady, he gets kicked to the curb. He goes to Tampa and wins the Super Bowl. And for Bill Belichick, outside of Mac Jones' rookie season, it's all been downhill from here. His drafting when it comes to weapons has been terrible. He doesn't know how to find dynamic wide receivers throughout the draft unless it's late in the draft. And then his offenses when it comes to OC hires, it's just been really bad judgment. Why the hell would you make Matt Patricia, who was a defensive coordinator, your offensive coordinator when he never called plays before? That was when the downfall of Bill Belichick began. Josh McDaniels was a fantastic offensive coordinator before he took that Raiders coaching job. And once he left, that was it. The defense has still been pretty solid, but offensively, you hire Matt Patricia, and then you get Bill O'Brien, which Bill O'Brien has been no better with a scheme that is pretty elementary because you're limited at quarterback. Like, Bill Belichick wanted Mac Jones. He drafted this dude, and he ruined them to a certain extent. You can put Mac Jones just not being that good of a quarterback all on him if you want to, but he played a part in this downfall of Mac Jones. This is the perfect textbook to ruining a young quarterback 101. Look how Bill Belichick decided to develop Mac Jones, giving him a defensive coordinator as his OC, and then bringing in Bill O'Brien. Bill Belichick, he's gone. He's going to get fired. He probably could get a shot with another team if he doesn't retire or if he still wants to, have another shot at it. But he needs to go to a team that already has a proven quarterback, and that would help him out a lot. Matt Eberflus, the Bears have looked a lot more competitive under him the last month, but it just isn't working out. The offensive coordinator that he hired is trash. Justin Fields, he just isn't efficient enough as a passer to be a serviceable starter for this team. They need to start over at quarterback, trade Justin Fields to another team with an offensive-minded coach guy that can develop him. The defense is really good. So if you wanted to bring him back for another year, I wouldn't be against it. I just would say move on from Justin Fields because you obviously don't know what to do with him and find another offensive coordinator also. So when you start over with Caleb Williams and you get a new OC to pair alongside with them, it's kind of like a fresh start. It's a clean slate. Matt Eberflus, the defense has looked really good. So that's the only reason I say he should get a third season. You got to be able to get the quarterback situation figured out. And he's in a really good position too. You see, the sign that you have a bad coach is when he specializes in one area of the ball and that ball is terrible or that side of the ball is terrible. Matt Eberflus with this Bears defense, when they've healthy, they've been a top 10 unit. I wouldn't be against giving him one more year, but I think he's probably going to get fired. Jim Harbaugh is going to be a hot candidate out there potentially. Ben Johnson. There's just a lot of head coaches out there that could be proven better candidates to better lead the Bears than what Matt Eberflus is capable of doing for the next couple of years. Dennis Allen, they just lost tonight to the LA Rams. This dude is an awful head coach. He got out-coached by Sean McVay. It was like watching a scrimmage game between a JV and a varsity high school football team. And, they came back. They made it a one-score possession, and the dude decides to kick an onside kick, despite the fact that he had more than enough time for his defense to get a stop. And maybe have like 2 cracks at it. This dude he's not it. He's done. He's fried. This easily has been one of the NFL's most disappointing teams under Dennis Allen. He doesn't have really good clock management. His in-game decision-making is terrible. His defenses are really good. He's just one of those coaches that he's a great coordinator, awful head coach. Arthur Smith has to go. What he's done with the Falcons offense and Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson is tragic. All right, as a fantasy football owner, Bijan Robinson, I'm biased against Arthur Smith losing his job. Anytime you draft a running back in the first round and you can't find more creative ways to get them involved via the passing game and the run game, there's a problem. All right, Drake London was a top 10 pick also. And you can't find ways to get him more targets and you can't get him more involved in the passing game, there's a problem. Kyle Pitts is a versatile weapon. You can play him at receiver. You can play him in the slot. You play him as a tight end. You play him anywhere on the field. He's like a football chess piece. And you don't know how to get him involved. That's the problem. Arthur Smith has to go in. They got to take Desmond Ridder and just push him out the door along with Arthur Smith. He isn't it neither. They need to get Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix and get a young offensive-minded head coach that actually knows how to get the most out of this young, talented core that they have. Now, Ben Johnson, he's asking for $15 million a year. If their owner is willing to pay that price for him and they get Ben Johnson, with this Falcons offense, yeah, they possibly could be a tough out next year in the NFC. They need to keep their defensive coordinator. He's done a fantastic job with this defense. They need some better cornerbacks, but that can be addressed in free agency. But they got to move on from Arthur Smith. This dude isn't it. He's not good. He's not awful, but with the fact that he can't get his best players the weapon or his best players the ball offensively, he just has to go. Mike McCarthy, I think he's going to get fired too. You may be really upset about that. JT, how is Mike McCarthy going to get fired? The Cowboys are having a great season. Man, listen, the Cowboys always perform well in the regular season. They played good last season. But the problem is that they don't go far in the playoffs. Mike McCarthy isn't going to be judged on what they do in the regular season. He's going to be judged based on his ability to make a deep postseason run. And this team has the talent to do it. The defense is talented. The offense is talented. Dak Prescott is playing at the highest level that we've ever seen him play in all his years in the league. There's no reason why the Cowboys cannot win it all. And if they lose in the wild card or the divisional round, it will be a huge disappointment. And you will have to go. There's been plenty of coaches in the past that have been able to take their team to the playoffs. And with this talent of a unit, they've been able to go deep. You know, offensive-minded coaches are taking over the league. Look at what Zach Taylor has done with Joe Burrow. Look what he's doing now with Jake Browning. Mike McCarthy, there's no more excuses that you can make for him. You know, this team is fairly healthy. They got the talent to make a deep playoff run. If the Dallas Cowboys don't go far in the playoffs and they don't at least make it to the conference championship, I believe there's going to be a change. Ron Rivera, it's done. The riverboat has sailed. It was really interesting their first year when they went to the playoffs, winning that division when it was terrible with Alex Smith at QB. It was a great story, and they had a fairly competitive game against Tampa Bay with Taylor Heineke at QB. But other than that, this team has just been stuck at, at best 7-win team. And this season, they've just completely bottomed out on Ron Rivera. He just doesn't resonate with the locker room anymore. You got Jonathan Allen saying he's tired of this shit. He's 7 years of the same shit. Like, I feel you, Jonathan Allen. I feel you. Commanders fans feel you, man. Ron Rivera, he doesn't have good decision-making. He doesn't know when to go for it on fourth down. He goes for it in the wrong moments, and then he makes the dumbest play calls in those moments, or Eric Bieniemy does. Ron Rivera just doesn't have a good feel for the game anymore. He has to go. He cannot be the Commanders head coach any longer. And I'm pretty confident if I was betting money on any of these coaches getting fired, Ron Rivera most definitely is out the door already. He's just coaching for respect at this point. Maybe he'll be somebody's defensive coordinator next year if he still wants to coach, but I doubt that. He probably is going to retire. It's just nice guy. You like him, but this just isn't working out anymore. It's just one of those situations where his time is coming. Florida State, they're looking to get out of the ACC. There's a report out there that says that them getting left out of the playoffs has amplified their desire to get out of this conference. And even last year, and last offseason, they wanted to get out of the ACC, and there was some flyers being thrown out there. But the SEC didn't want them because Clemson, they reportedly were going to follow FSU and South Carolina and Florida. They were against that. They were like, nah, we don't want no rivals in the SEC. And the thing about this situation is that it's not all about them getting left out of the playoffs. Even though that has made them more frustrated in the matter, and now they're getting lawyers involved, and they're trying to find a way to get out of their Grenna rights. Now, basically what it is that the ACC has ownership of Florida State's media rights until 2036. And basically for them to leave this conference and for them to go elsewhere, they need that shit back. And they got to get lawyers involved because basically this is one of those situations where they got to try to find a small hole or a small loophole in this media rights contract for them to find a way to wiggle their way out of the ACC. And basically the ACC, they can't allow this to happen because if this happens, they're done. And the only thing that is keeping the ACC alive right now is that grant of rights. In Florida State, their athletic director last year, he said, something has to change. And with them getting left out of the playoffs, he was like, that was unforgivable. And you're looking at the ACC, and if you're the commissioner of that conference right now, like, you're sweating bullets. Because why is Florida State making less than what UCF and Rutgers are? That's an embarrassment to the Florida State brand. This definitely is one of the blue bloods of college football. You cannot tell the story of the college football game without mentioning Florida State. They've had a lot of iconic players and iconic moments. So they got a right to want more money. Now, if they would have made it to the playoffs this year, then they would have got some royalties and some additional bonuses from getting in. And maybe that wouldn't have sped up their process of wanting to get out this conference. But it's just one of those situations where it's going to get muddy and it's not going to look pretty. And Florida State, they're just kind of stuck. And even if they are able to find a way to wiggle their way out of this thing, if there is a loophole in this whole contract with their grant of rights, what conference is going to want to take them? Because the SEC doesn't want them unless their ADs have a change of heart, that being Florida and, South Carolina, because Clemson's going to follow because they're in a little bit of the same vote, although they're not as big as what you are. So Florida State, they're the one team in the ACC that is keeping this thing from falling apart completely. And the ACC has to find a way to appease these dudes, and there's not really a way they can. Like, the best moves that they made and the whole conference realignment thing was them getting SMU, and that's about it. Cal and Stanford are academic schools. And then you got Notre Dame, who refuses to join the conference. Like, just force Notre Dame to join your conference, but you can't. Just Notre Dame just runs you. Notre Dame's AD said it would be despicable for Stanford and Cal, great fine academic institutions, to not be allowed to compete in Division I football. So if you're Florida State, you're just shaking your head at the moons. You're just like, yeah, man, like, we won out. And the ACC is like, no, you're not going anywhere. Because if you do, we're done. And the ACC knows this. And I'm really interested in seeing if FSU's lawyers, because they do got a really good law program down there in Tallahassee, if they can find a loophole. And if there's anybody who is possible, or if there's anybody capable of being able to do that, it is Florida State's lawyers. So we're going to see how this thing plays out, but I doubt that we're going to see Florida State going anywhere anytime soon. Like, they're really upset that they got left out of the playoffs. Like, I understand their pain. I understand their frustrations. The ACC conference as a whole has been down, but things are about to turn up for this conference. I feel in 2024, Miami, they should be really good. SMU, they're a team that people are sleeping on right now. They just won the American Athletic Conference, so they are winning at a pretty good level under Red Lashley at head coach. So the ACC is going to be a little bit more competitive than what you may think. But Florida State, yeah, they need that money. And if they want to be able to compete with the best of the best, they got to get the revenue. It really has broken my heart with the way this Jordan Seaton situation has turned. So this dude goes on undisputed, commits to Colorado, and nobody really expected him to go to Colorado. He wasn't really a finalist on his top 5, or they weren't really a finalist in his top 5. But then, he commits to Colorado on national television, and he's pitching other people to come play for Colorado. And then on national early signing day, the dude is tweeting out this meme of somebody sweating. And listen, if he leaves IMG Academy and goes to Maryland instead of Colorado, I will respect his decision. All right, I wouldn't like it, but at the same time, we don't know this dude's situation. And there's other schools like Ohio State, Bama, Tennessee that are in the mix, offer him a lot of money. And if Colorado can't offer this dude enough money to come play for them, then I can't have any hard feelings about him going elsewhere. You got to chase the bag. Like, people want to make it seem like it's despicable that he'll want to play for a team that can offer more money versus getting less at Colorado. This dude is the #1 offensive tackle prospect in high school. He could get some life-changing money that could completely change his family situation. Now, on the football side of this, Colorado, they need this dude because their recruiting class is terrible. And I'm not a Colorado hater. I'm just a Colorado truther. I want Deion Sanders to succeed, but with how their recruiting class looks right now, they're more focused on acquiring guys in the transfer portal. They don't really need nobody via recruiting anyway. I think next year will really be a make-or-break season for them because a lot of the guys that they got in the transfer portal, they are going to be eligible to graduate or go elsewhere. With the guys they brought in through the transfer portal, they can get better. They can be developed, and most of those guys can improve. But Deion has hit the offensive line pretty hard. But Jordan Seaton was going to be a major part in this offensive overhaul when it comes to the offensive line. And without him, who's going to be playing left tackle? It's hard to find a great offensive tackle. And you can say, well, Jordan Seaton hasn't played a single game, so you don't know how good he's going to be. Dude, he's the #1 offensive tackle prospect for a reason. You don't just get that label just for being overrated. Like, this dude is legit. And the majority of these tackles that get rated this high, 24/7 Sports and On3, they're not too wrong that often in their evaluations. This dude is a potential NFL caliber player. And Colorado needs him on that offensive line this year. And I'm really hurt that he possibly could be flipping elsewhere. I wanted him to be a buff. But, it's just one of those situations where you look at college football and the way this sport has turned around into pretty much being a semi-pro version of the NFL with free agency and these recruits getting thrown all this money. Like, Deion Sanders is a really lovable guy, and he's one of the most recognizable athletes in the history of sports. But him being Coach Prime isn't going to be enough to lure these recruits to Colorado unless they have money to compete with these schools. Now, of course, these players are going to have to take less to go play for Coach Prime. Like Jordan Seaton, we know that Colorado has to have given him an offer. He's too good to just be going there off the face. Like, people think that these players are supposed to go to Colorado off the face because it's Coach Prime and they should want to play for him. But in reality, in life, most decisions are driven by money. Money runs the world. And if you don't have enough money to offer a dude like Jordan Seaton, then it's going to be hard to sell this dude on being able to come play for you. All right. Now, it's not like they're going to be able to offer him $1 million NIL deal, but let's say they're offering him $600,000 and Tennessee gives him $1 million. If you're Coach Prime, you can say, dude, like, we won't be able to offer you that much, but we got a good enough offer where you can take care of your kinfolks. You feel me? And then that's where you have to come and make the decision to want to help Colorado and want to be part of this Colorado rebuild under Coach Prime. And he's not a bad person. He's a young kid. Him going on national television and now flipping on Colorado potentially. I know it doesn't sit well with a lot of Bucs fans. Trust me, like, I don't really have a big problem with it, to be fair with you, because it's just high school recruiting. That's just what these recruits do. That's why I said when Jordan Seaton first made his commitment, it's not official till they sign on the dotted line. Because way too many times we get attached to these recruits before they even have a chance to make it official. And then when they don't make it official, we get really pissed off because we envisioned what they were going to be with our program and what they were going to bring to us from a play perspective on the field. But this is just the reality of college football. This is just what happens. They're not the only school that deals with this. Florida State lost somebody to Georgia. That's just what happens in the sport. Now, I'm pretty sure that FSU was pissed off when Travis Hunter flipped the Coach Prime. So that's just how college football works, man. You gotta have money to compete. You can't expect everybody to beat Travis Hunter. All right, if these players are incentivized to chase the money, then there's nothing wrong with that. Because at the end of the day, money goes around, makes the world go around, and you don't know this dude's situation. This is life-changing money. Hell, like if I was getting offered $400,000 more to play at another school other than Colorado, I would take it too. But if it was like, $800,000 and $1 million, then I would take the $800,000. Okay, like it's close enough. So Jordan Seaton is going to come down to, how much does he like the coaching staff? How much does he believe in Coach Prime and his ability to get an offensive line coach that can help him live up to his potential? And is there going to be a NIL package that is respectable enough to make him want to consider playing for the Buffs? Like Dion even said it himself. You got to have money if you want to be able to get these guys, man. Before I give you guys my national championship predictions, if you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that every episode of the podcast is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. Gotta take one more sip of water before we finish off this episode. Okay, here we go. College football semifinal game number 1, Alabama versus Michigan. Nick Saban has been here before. He's not new to this. He's true to this. Jim Harbaugh, however, this is his 3rd straight year in the college football playoffs. In his last 2 trips, he's come up short. They got stunned by TCU. They got outplayed and outcoached in that game. They got ran off the field the first time they made it when they got blown out by Georgia. But this is Jim Harbaugh's most talented team. And they're just as good as Alabama. I don't think that neither one of these teams is better than the other. They're evenly matched. And they got similar styles of play. Just a tad bit of a style change when it comes to comparing the quarterback positions. But offensively, they both are pretty solid at wide receiver. Isaiah Bond, Jermaine Burton, you got Cornelius Johnson, and you also have Roman Wilson, who's really good. The offensive line is probably the only position that Michigan has a significant advantage compared to Alabama. Okay, Bama's offensive line has played better the last couple of weeks, but it hasn't been that good this season. Michigan has the best offensive line in college football. The majority of us should agree on that. But other than that, Alabama, their running backs are really good. They're not as good as Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, but they're good enough to get the job done. And plus, you got to account for Jalen Milroe's dual threat ability. And that's really the biggest difference between these two teams' styles of offense. You see, Michigan, they're a balanced team because they run the ball down your throat. Then they can get the play action game going and get some big plays downfield. Alabama, you have to account for Jalen Milroe's rushing ability and what he means to this ground game. And then also the other running backs that they have. And once they get the run game going, then that can open up some opportunities for them to have a couple of big plays downfield, because Jalen Milroe, this dude is more accurate throwing deep passes than he is throwing passes in the intermediate, short, and medium areas of the field. It's a little strange, okay? But Michigan and Alabama offensively, they both are teams that their success offensively is heavily going to be determined by how effective their run game is. And if their run games don't show up in this game, let's say Michigan has more success slowing down the run of Alabama than what Alabama's defense is able to do against Michigan, and vice versa, that's going to be the team who has the advantage offensively, because neither one of these teams want to find themselves in a situation where they have to lean on their quarterback to throw the ball 25 plus to win this game. J.J. McCarthy, he's a really good player, but I think he's incredibly overhyped when it comes to an NFL draft standpoint. and I look at these quarterbacks from an NFL standpoint, like, I don't think he throws with great anticipation. He can hold the ball a little bit too long. Like, I don't really know about him. And the last time I saw this dude in a situation where he had to carry the team on his back was against TCU, and he had a solid game when you look at the stats, but he had some mind-boggling decision-making. And even this year, they haven't really asked him to throw the ball all that much. Now, is it because how dominant the run game has been? Yes, it is. But at the same time, you still have to let this dude loose if he's as good as what you say he is. And I haven't seen a game where J.J. McCarthy has looked like a quarterback that's good enough to carry Michigan's passing game if they do become one-dimensional. That's always been the biggest question with Michigan this year offensively. Can you stop this run game? You know, I thought Penn State was going to be able to do it, and they ran it 31 times down their throat. All right, Ohio State, they were better at stopping it than what Penn State was, but they still didn't have a lot of success getting off the field when it mattered the most. Michigan is a really physical team. When you're playing this squad, not only are you getting ready for a football game, but you're getting ready for a battle. Like, they just have this gladiator warrior mentality. You know, but Alabama, with how good their run defense has been this season, you know, if they can find a way to slow down how effective Michigan is running the football, let's say that they can slow down this rushing attack for the first 2 quarters. All right, that can be good enough to put them in a situation where maybe they can go in a halftime for lead. Alabama offensively, with how dynamic Jalen Milroe is, it's hard for you just to completely slow down this offense. Okay, and Alabama, they don't need to ask Jalen Milroe to do too much. But at the same time, the same game plan that Michigan has to be the same game plan that Alabama is going to have to face. Because Jalen Milroe, just like J.J. McCarthy, they're dynamic quarterbacks, but they are 2 QBs that aren't going to be able to carry you to a win with their arm. And the last time that Jalen Milroe was put in a game where he had to throw Alabama to a win, it was not pretty when they lost to Texas at home. J.J. McCarthy and Jalen Milroe are really good quarterbacks. I don't think J.J. McCarthy has the quarterback advantage over Jalen Milroe. All right, both of these guys are going to be NFL players. Jalen Milroe just started the season out slow, and he's got progressively better. And you can say that Jalen Milroe hasn't faced a defense as good as this, but Michigan hasn't seen a quarterback like this. And there's this narrative that Michigan is a more talented team than Alabama. No, they're not. As I said earlier, they're evenly matched. But when you look at the recruiting rankings, Alabama has ranked number 1 on 24/7 Sports Team Talent Composite ranking for this past season. And when you look at the teams that have won a national championship, nobody outside of the top 10 of that ranking has ever won a natty. And the SEC has won 6 out of the last 9 of them, including 4 straight. Because eventually, the depth is going to have to be there. And Nick Saban, he has a lot of experience in these games. Jim Harbaugh, he's still fishing for his first win. And we don't know if this Michigan team is even going to be able to show up when it comes to the coaching side of things. You know, like this Alabama team, they're going to be well coached. They're not going to be in a situation where you got to ask, are they not going to show up? Like, that was Nick Saban coaching Michigan last year against TCU. You would have won that game. And you can't really disagree and say that I'm wrong, even though you may be one of those people who don't like hypotheticals, but Nick Saban has only lost 1 first-round playoff game, and that was to Urban Meyer. You see, Jim Harbaugh and Michigan, they got a lot to prove in this game. And many people, to my surprise, are picking the Tide to win. Defensively, they got a really good secondary. All right, Michigan has a really good secondary. So, with how good their defenses are, it's really going to come down to who can have more success stopping the run and which quarterback is going to struggle more in the big moments. Is it going to be Jalen Milroe or J.J. McCarthy? Me, I'm taking the Tide. I believe J.J. McCarthy in Michigan, they're going to struggle in this game. Alabama's defense is not a defense that they faced. Ohio State and Penn State got great defenses, but Alabama's defense is better than those. All right, and even in those games, like, it's not like they were moving the ball out well offensively. Like, it was a grind when you were watching them in those games, and you're not going to run the football 31 straight times against Alabama. I'm taking the Tide, man. Roll Tide. Let's go. Texas versus Washington. This is the semifinal game that I am the most excited for because I honestly am torn between who I am picking to win this matchup. Because these teams are evenly matched, and to be honest with you, the winner of this game to me is going to decide who wins the national championship. Because there are both bad matchups for Alabama and Michigan. Alabama and Michigan are run-dominant teams. If they don't have success running the ball offensively, it's wraps. Regardless of how good their defenses are, Texas and Washington, they're more complete teams than what Michigan and Alabama are. At least to me, when you look at the stylistic standpoint of this. Texas, they got the talent advantage over Washington. All right, when you ask yourself who is just the best overall team, you got to give it to Texas. They're better up front. Defensive line is really stout against the run. They got stout linebackers. Their secondary is their weakness. All right. And Texas fans try to defend this and say, man, like, we just give up a lot of yards late in games. Like, Dylan Gabriel shredded that secondary. Will Howard for Kansas State before he entered the portal, he shredded that defense. And you see, Texas offensively, they got a fantastic offensive line. We know how good they are at wide receiver with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and Quinn Ewers at quarterback, and how great their run game is despite losing their starting running back. But the biggest mismatch in this game for Texas defensively is their secondary against Washington's wide receivers. Washington's offensive line is no pushover. All right, they may not have anybody from the South like what you do, those big boys from the South, but they got those big Polynesians, man, and those dudes, they're really good offensive linemen also. Those dudes on the West Coast, don't sleep on those dudes. Like, this is a really fantastic offensive line. They've only given up 10 sacks this year. In Washington, they don't need to have a great day on the ground to beat this Texas team. I've heard Longhorns fans DM me and say that, you know, Washington isn't going to win because they're not going to be able to run the ball on this defense. They don't need to. They've never been a team that has won games because they've had a lot of success on the ground outside of the way that they beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship with how good they are at wide receiver. As long as this is one of those games where they can start out hot and Michael Penix is on, they can throw bombs and get big plays all day on that Texas secondary. And do we forget how that Alamo Bowl went between these two teams last year? Who won that game? Washington. Like, these football games aren't always about who's more talented. There's an old expression that goes, styles make fights. And stylistically, the biggest disadvantage that Texas defense has is their secondary. And you can say and make all the excuses all you want to, but these are 3 6-foot tall or bigger wide receivers that are 200 plus, that are really good at stretching the field, really good after the catch. You're not going to be able to slow these dudes down. You haven't seen an offense like this all season long. Now, Texas, offensively against Washington's defense, look, Washington's defense isn't as bad as what you may think. If you're somebody who just looks at the statistics, of course you're going to say, man, this defense sucks. But if you really pay attention to Washington, they've dealt with some injuries on that side of the football. There was one stretch of the year when they were playing with the flu. The second half of the season, this defense kind of carried this team to the finish line. They barely were able to beat Arizona State. They barely were able to beat Oregon State. Their offense scored 20-something in the first half, and they got shut out by the Ducks. And that Beavs offense, they got shut down by that Huskies defense in the end. And in the Pac-12 championship, their defense really won the game. Washington defensively, they're formidable. All right, they're not as big and deep as what Texas is up front, but they're going to be well coached. And they're going to have a way at being able to generate a couple of stops because Quinn Ewers, like Michael Penix, they're really streaky quarterbacks at times. Quinn Ewers has had games in the past when he's got out the slow starts and he's got a little bit rattled early. This is going to be a game that comes down to which offense can get going faster. If Michael Penix comes out of the gate looking like how he did against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, it's going to be tough sledding for Texas defensively. Same thing for Quinn Ewers and his Longhorns offense. And they're more balanced than Washington. Washington can run the football when they have to, but you do need to be a little bit balanced. But with how effective their passing attack is and with how good of a quarterback Michael Penix is, their offensive line can hold up and they can get a lot of shots downfield on Texas secondary. Washington, their defense isn't just going to get torn apart because Oregon is a really good team. All right, and if you would have played Oregon, they would have put points on your defense too. Let's not act like your defense has just had these masterclass performances against offenses all season long. When you've gone up against capable quarterbacks, you've gotten torn to shreds. Will Howard was snapping on your defense. Dylan Gabriel went off against your defense. So let's just cut this narrative that, your secondary is going to just all of a sudden have everybody out there looking like the Royal Reavers. You're not going to box this offense. All right. Kalen DeBoer and his offensive coordinator, I think that they're being really underestimated in this game. When it comes to the coaching advantage, Kalen DeBoer has that over Steve Sarkisian. Kalen DeBoer, this dude has been winning everywhere he's been. Even when he was coaching NIA. And the dude that's who his offensive coordinator was on his staff those years as well. He hasn't lost the game since last year. And they beat you the last time they faced off against each other. So Kalen DeBoer, this is a coach that always has his team ready for the big games and the bright lights. Texas, they're back. All right, we've been wondering when it was finally going to be true, but this is the year. And this is a game that can go either way because Texas offense, they're going to put up a lot of points on Washington's defense. Nobody's denying that. Washington's defense may get a couple of stops or two. Is Washington going to be able to take advantage of that? We'll see. But this is a game where both of these squads are going to put up at least 30 to 40 points. All right. I'm picking Washington with the upset. Michael Penix, Roma Dunze, Kalen DeBoer, I believe they're going to top the Longhorns 45 to 38. It's really hard to pick who's going to win this game because both of these teams, to me, stylistically, are really even. And I like Michael Penix more than Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers has played great, but I just trust Michael Penix because he's been more consistent than Quinn Ewers. And Quinn Ewers has had some games when he's looked a little off. Now, he has had injuries that he's had to battle through, but I just really like this Washington team. I really do. They've been underestimated all year long, but I've been rocking with them. I picked them to win the Pac-12 before the season started. People don't even realize that. I picked them to beat Oregon twice. And the reason why I say this team is underestimated is because people thought they were going to lose to Oregon State. Nobody thought that they were going to beat Oregon again. Everybody was saying how Oregon possibly was the second best team and Washington was just being overlooked. They were shocked. A lot of people were shocked when Washington got into the playoffs. This was my playoff pick before the season started. You can go look on my Twitter, JT Sports __ and type in Washington, and you're going to see my playoff predictions. I had them in along with FSU. We know FSU got screwed, but this Washington team, man, People didn't expect them to remain unbeaten after they beat Oregon the first time. And then when they beat Oregon again, everybody's like, oh shit. Everybody's trying to figure out just how good is this Washington team. And Texas, if they were so much better than Washington and Washington's offensive line wasn't going to be able to hold up and it was going to be a mismatch in the trenches, Vegas wouldn't have them favored by 4 points. You know, like Vegas, I think kind of leans Texas a little bit too soft. Like, if they really believed that Texas was going to win this game convincingly, they would make them a touchdown favorite. Washington, with how good this coaching staff is and the talent that they got at receiver and how effective their passing attack is going to be, they're going to be able to put up a lot of points on Texas defense. Texas offensively is going to be able to do the same, but I trust Washington's defense more in critical situations. They were able to slow down Oregon's offense. Oregon has one of the most efficient offenses in college football over the past 2 years, and that's with the new offensive coordinator. Like, Washington's defense, they're not great, but they show up in big moments. I like Texas. All right. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you subscribe to our other YouTube channels. We got our NFL channel and the college football channel up. We're going to be uploading exclusive NFL and college football contents to those respective channels. So go ahead and check those out and rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. Remember that every episode, this one included, is going to be available on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Hottie Toddy, Mississippi 601 tapping in, my boy. What's going on, Del Rice?